something out there waiting for us. And it ain't no man.
I just found this sub, so I figured I'd share my story. I was at my parents' trailer in the far north woods of Wisconsin. Drinks were had and my mum and girlfriend had gone to bed. My dad and I were sitting on the opposite ends of the fire, and he was telling me some story. Behind his left shoulder, my right side, and over our log pile I could see, well, a glimmery entity walking around our neighbor's campsite. My dad kept talking, and I feigned interest as I watched this thing meander about. It didn't seem like it had anything it was specifically doing, but I could clearly see it mosey around their site and seemingly facing their trailer the whole time. Eventually I lost my line of sight and it seemingly disappeared into the woodline. I don't know what I saw or how to explain it, and am a bit more cautious every time I stay there now. I was 13 years old, in Lake Orion, Michigan, visiting my mum's friends and their kids for the 4th of July weekend. Me and my friend and the other kids were roaming around the city area late at night. We ended up walking down some residential roads. It was really quiet and dead out, probably around 2 a.m. No cars driving around. Just that really calm, peaceful time at night hooligans can run wild. Some of the kids wanted to ding-dong ditch some houses, and I was kind of a straight-edged kid, so I went along with it, even though it made me nervous. We had ding-dong ditched probably 5 houses at that point, and the kids started pressuring me to do it. That it was my turn, don't be such a pussy type stuff. So they directed me to ring the doorbell of the house we were standing in front of. It was a smaller white house, square-shaped, some metal fencing around the back for the owner's dogs. I walked up and there was no doorbell, so I walked back. They told me to just knock then. So, as someone who didn't want to kill the fun, I went back and knocked to find they had already taken off running. I ran after them, and I don't know if I believe what they were saying, but even my friends said they saw it. Apparently, there was a face in the window the first time I went up, and the house is notoriously haunted. So I was a little spooked and out of breath. We must have run half a mile. I looked behind me to see if there was anything scary following us, and I saw this figure that I have always described as looking made out of water. A humanoid figure, translucent, that makes the background behind them wavy, and has a defined outline. I figured my mind was playing tricks on me, and I just kept walking, joking around with the others, looking back every so often. It was following us, and I could see it under the street lamps every so often. The leader kid that wanted to ding-dong ditch houses looked to see what I was looking at, and exclaimed to his friend, "Do you see that?" and took off running. My friend looked back and took off running, and I was again left running after them. We ran all the way back to his house, probably 3 miles. No sign of it behind us anymore, but I've never been so shook up or scared in my entire life. I was inconsolable. I was scared for a while that I would see it again and find out it had been following me the entire time. It's been over 10 years now, and I've never seen anything like that again. And I've never been able to find anything like it searching for hours on the internet. Until now.
Starting off, this happened nearly 10 years ago, but I recently spoke with an old co-worker that I ran into again, and talking about the old days, it was brought up. That was when I realized the feeling of being stalked wasn't limited to me. When I was about 22 and working for a very small security company of only 18 people at the time, we worked a tourist area location called Seven Falls in southwest Colorado Springs, in the Cheyenne Mountain Canyon area. I remember shifts being grueling, due mostly to the fact that we were in direct sunlight until the afternoon and evening. And an average shift, we were expected to walk a minimum of 7 miles between the base of the parking area to the top of the falls, and rarely were allowed to use the guest elevator for handicapped and elderly. The whole park was on a hilly incline, so walking the top down was okay. Bottom up is what exhausted us. In the evening, near the base of the falls, native Ute or Cheyenne tribal dancers would perform, and we had to monitor crowds, which was slight breaks for about 15 to 20 minutes. These falls were frequented by area tribes for hundreds of years and were still considered spiritual, so it was the native tribes that pushed for the performances since Seven Falls is considered a state park. At the end of the night, we would sit at the main entrance into the falls at the bottom of the canyon, off the lower Gold Camp Road, and monitor the toll booth until roughly 1 a.m., except during weekends and holidays when we were out there till 3 in the morning. On several occasions when waiting for the end of my shifts, I always had occurrences that made me feel like I was going to get attacked by either an animal or a person. Guttural hissing, deep, mannish groans, and harassing growls could always be heard from behind the giant gate. Glowing eyes, either red or white in color, but larger than area wildlife, could be seen from behind bushes and tree canopies. But what stuck with me was a shimmering humanoid shape. The shimmering was otherworldly. The way I always described it to my family and a few friends was like that of the Predator. My first work firearm was an older Smith & Wesson semi-automatic single-stack pistol that was my dad's when he worked for the Fountain Police Department. But this was the first time I felt I was defenseless while working. I watched this shimmering silhouette crawl on the asphalt over to the toll booth. After then, it appeared to stand upright and extend a long, waving arm. This looked like a being phasing between the physical and incorporeal realms. As I shifted my weight to get a closer look, as I was awestruck, the glowing reddish eyes slowly came back into focus. Then in a snap, I hear what sounds like an animal climbing up the side of the toll booth gutter, and watched as the shimmer jumped to a tree no less than 20 feet away. From here, the shimmer jumped again. This time, a broken branch fell from the tree. A loud clashing sound rang from the top center of the gate as the shimmer looked back one last time before going over the gate and disappearing into the Seven Falls Park, bringing us to today in May of 2022. My old co-worker and I ran into each other while at Walmart. We decided to go to the Gunther Totti's diner next door. While having a burger and reminiscing about the good old days, he brings up, "Did you ever see the Predator in his active camouflage at Seven Falls?" My blood ran cold, and I dropped a shade to just about pale. He then proceeded to tell me about his experience on his shifts that I'd never heard. After leaving the diner and arriving home, I sat in the driveway for a moment, contemplating what inhabits lower Gold Camp Road.
This story I'm about to share is actually why I joined Reddit on my quest to find out if this has happened to anyone else. This is 100% true, and is really hard for me to share because anytime I have tried to tell someone else about it, I get laughed at and accused of just trying to pull their leg. I recently saw an article about a woman who was hunting and had seen an invisible or cloaked creature that she described as almost like a predator from the movie of the same name. I read her story and seen the picture she took of said predator. Now, As for her picture, I personally think it is a combination of flare from the sun and a close-up of possibly her face or something. I'm not dismissing her story though, actually quite the opposite, since I too have encountered something similar, and is what prompted me to seek out if anyone else has encountered a predator in the woods. Now, onto my encounter. When I was about 5 years old, I was playing by the edge of the woods behind my grandmother's house. I played there often, and my grandmother just kept an eye on me from the kitchen or living room, because the house had huge windows that faced the woods. She would come out every once in a while, just to see what I was up to. I was obsessed with digging in the dirt and collecting unusual rocks and arrowheads that littered the land where my grandmother lived. I should mention, this is Midwest Illinois, not far from Cahokia Mountains, so finding arrowheads was actually not that uncommon. Anyway, that day I remember picking out a spot to dig. I'd been there for quite a while because I remember I had a pretty decent sized hole going, when something caught my eye up in a tree that I was next to. I almost don't know how to explain it, but it looked like almost a heat wave coming off the branch of a tree. It was fall. I remember this because I had my pink jacket on and remember thinking that my mum was going to be pissed because I had dirt around the bottom of the arms from digging. I also remember there had been a lot of leaves on the ground. Anyway, I'm staring at this heat wave and realize it has a human shape. So here I am, 5 years old and wondering why there is an invisible man in the tree. I remember feeling scared but unsure what to do. Then it started moving and making a faint clicking sound. That is about the time that I decided that I was not supposed to be seeing this, and I hightailed it back to the house. My grandmother saw that I was pretty shaken, and I remember telling her that I had just seen an angel. In my 5-year-old mind, I didn't know what else it could be. I'd never heard of aliens or ghosts or monsters, so to me, it had to be an angel because that's all my little mind could think of. Fast forward to when I'm about 12 years old. By this time, the encounter was way out of my mind. I loved watching action and sci-fi movies. My dad rented a movie called Predator. I'm watching it with him, and the first time you see the Predator, invisible or cloaked in the movie, I about shit my pants. All the memories from that day, digging in the dirt, came flooding back. I even asked my dad if Predator was real or if he knew if anyone or any animal that had cloaking abilities that I didn't know about. He told me it was all fake. It wasn't like it is today where I could just Google it. I had no access to the internet, so again, I just put it out of my mind. Again, fast forward to about the year 2004. I'm grown. I have 3 small children. I just went through a separation from my husband. I moved to the next town over to an apartment with my kids. These apartments are all 1-level duplexes, with there being 5 buildings. I am at the very last apartment of the last building. The apartments are considered in town but are on the outskirts. There is a deep ditch that runs behind the buildings with a chain link fence that separates the backyard from the ditch. There are about 6 to 7 trees on our side of the fence. If you follow the ditch a little bit, you hit a small forest that eventually leads to the country, with a larger forest and farmland. I'm a smoker, but would not smoke in the apartment because of the kids, so I often went out to the back porch. One night, I was up late doing laundry and stuff after the kids went to bed. I decided to take a smoke break before I myself went to sleep. I am back there on the porch, and I started hearing this faint clicking sound. I immediately looked to the ditch because I had seen a groundhog out there a few days before, and thought perhaps he was out there again. The yard is faintly lit from the outside light that is by the playground that is to the right of my back porch. I didn't turn on my back porch light. I didn't normally if I was just going out for a quick smoke. I didn't see any groundhog or movement from the ditch, so I go back to smoking my cigarette. The faint clicking sound keeps happening, and a slight shift of movement makes me look up into the tree, to the left of my porch. It's there. The same invisible thing I had seen when I was 5. It's like a distortion, and in a humanoid shape. It is crouched down on the branch with an arm out, holding onto the trunk of the tree. I couldn't believe it. I was like, is this happening? Has it come to kill me from me seeing it all those years ago? All I could think about was my kids in the apartment sleeping. I ran in and slammed the door and locked it. I ran to the kids' rooms and made sure the windows were locked. Then I just turned out the lights in the living room and stared at the blinds at the tree to see if I could catch another glimpse of it. I sat there for about a good 10 minutes and couldn't see anything. I began to think that I'm just tired and my mind was playing tricks on me. Just as I was finally talking myself down, my neighbor's dog comes running across the yard and starts barking at the tree, at the same branch that I had seen this predator thing. That pretty much freaked me out, because this dog was not a barker. I actually have never heard him bark at anything, even at the groundhog that had been hanging out at the ditch. This barking went on for a few minutes, until I hear the neighbor lady who owns the dog calling back inside. The dog reluctantly turned to go back home, stopping every few feet to look back at the branch of the tree until he was out of my sight. I didn't sleep that night, and have never seen anything like it again. I don't know what to think of it. I am a grown woman. I have kids and a good career. I just want to know if anyone else has ever had an experience like this. I know what I saw. Believe it or not, thanks for taking the time to listen to this. This was a long time ago. I was a teenager. My parents were not strict, so I had a lot of freedom. I had 2 friends, and they had their own friends as well. And one of my friends' parents owned a huge part of this forest. We, my friends and their friends, went deep into the forest with a bunch of supplies and started making our own treehouse and forts. This was a big part of my childhood, building stuff with my friends. And this place became our sanctuary for a long time, where we'd spent a lot of our time away from adults. This event happened years after we built the place initially, and also after we rebuilt it because it got destroyed one time. This is a backstory for the events I'm about to recall. Me and my one friend spent the night at our sanctuary we built, which none of us have ever done before. We only hung out there, then went home. We all planned to spend the night together because it would be fun. Most of our friends weren't allowed to spend the night there though because of their parents, and the other that was allowed to go chickened out because he was afraid. So it was just me and one other person, my close friend's cousin. We weren't close at the time and fought a lot, but surprisingly we got along well that night. We spent most of the day swinging from trees, climbing them and hanging out on this tie rope swing while talking. It was a normal day. Then we laid down for some rest at around 9 p.m. About 10 minutes after laying down to bed in our sleeping bags, talking to each other under our makeshift tents, we heard rustling. I sat up and saw a very tall silhouette of something that looked to be humanish, that was also transparent. I could see right through it. I squinted and froze, and it very quickly climbed up this tall tree when I looked at it, disappearing. I was in complete disbelief and shock. I had no idea if I saw what I just saw, or if I hallucinated it. I wasn't scared in this moment, actually more perplexed. Being young and worried though, I said to my friend we should leave. And not wanting it to hear me, I got close to his ear and just said, "There's something in the woods looking at us." After I said that, I saw his facial expression turn into fear. So we got up and started walking down the path, out of the woods calmly. I didn't want to sprint because it might give chase. And also, I wasn't even sure if I saw anything. I'm just not taking chances. Very shortly after we started leaving, we both got this weird feeling of deja vu and confusion. Like we were hit with hard drugs or something. Except we don't do drugs, and only ate food from our house. No hallucinogenic plants in our part of the country. Nothing. Everything was slow, and I felt disoriented. But we continued to walk in this direction for quite a while, stumbling in the darkness because of our mental state, and I realized we should have been out of the forest by now. I knew this was the way out. 110% it was, because I've been going in and out of this place for years, even in the dark. Yet, I didn't recognize all the trees around us. Just the path. It was like our surroundings were changing. My friend randomly yelled, "Yeah, I'm coming," as I was looking in the opposite direction from him. And I turned around and, very confused, asked him why he is saying that. He says his mum is calling his name to help lead him out of the forest. I hear nothing at all. I tell him I don't hear anything, and he looks at me like I'm insane. And as he walks off the path and into the forest, I grab his arm and pull him back because I don't want him to get lost. That's when my friend sees the transparent thing I saw earlier, sitting perched on a tree branch in the direction his mum was calling for him. And he points it out to me. Its transparency is almost like a heatwave effect. We stared at it for 10 seconds in disbelief. It looked like a transparent being, but we were trying to discern if it was something else, and we were just imagining it being alive, because there was no movement. But just then, it hunched down like it was trying to stalk or be stealthy, and it quickly climbed up the tree a little more and went to the next one, then the next one, getting closer to us. We didn't hear it at all. It was completely silent. Its silence was amplified by the fact that all the other forest creatures have now gone completely silent, which I'd only begun to realize in that moment that not a single bug or animal has made a sound since we started leaving. This is when our curiosity of if we were both tripping and were mistaking something turned to fear once we began to see it move. Once it got above us though, the only thing we heard was the crunching of the branch as its weight is put on it. Every little sound that it made is so distinct because it's so quiet and remote. We can't see it because the top of the trees are so dark. We start actually running, terrified, not walking anymore. We hear noises in the trees above us until it fades away ahead of us, as if it ran ahead, but the sound was a lot quieter than if a normal animal was running tree to tree, as if this thing was light, but it wasn't very small, so that made no sense. We still kept running forward, despite it sounding like it went ahead, and we ended up back at the place we started. Many minutes of walking, and we were back at this place after running for like 20 seconds. It's impossible. But instead of staying on the ground, we climbed to the top of the treehouse with our items as quickly as possible and closed the door, wedging a small piece of plywood in it to keep it shut. We hear something climbing up and extremely odd noises as well, like mimicking noises of rain and wind. There's no water seeping into our treehouse with cracks in it, and it wasn't wet when we left. This persisted for a minute, and we didn't hear from it again. I'm pretty sure at that point it had left, but we spent the rest of the night there until the sun came up anyways. When he checked his iPod Touch for the time, this is right after we closed the door, it was 5 a.m. We started laying on the ground at 9 p.m. 8 hours passed in less than 40 minutes of time. Hours after, we could start to see the sun through the treehouse. Then we went home. I no longer talked to this friend, but after this incident we discussed it and said everything from both our point of views. And we randomly brought it up to each other every few months and relived it, making sure we were still on the same page about what happened and what we remember. I never spent the night out there again, and I didn't even let myself stay out there past 5 p.m. for a very long time. This is my story, and I'd be willing to take a polygraph test if the opportunity ever arises. Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. As always, a big thank you to all of the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. If you want to help support this channel, you will find links to both my Patreon and my Teespring store in the description below, so feel free to have a look. And the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.